Good afternoon. I'm Robin Hutchinson from the Community Brain, and first of all, a big thank you for allowing me to be within this wonderful construction. I had come here to say some things, but I've decided not to say any of that, in part because I've just listened to Salah speak and I thought it was beautiful. And if you missed it, I'd suggest when it is available you listen to it. And part of that, I want to start with, what I want to say, let's get some cards out. One is I'm bipolar, and one of the tricks with being bipolar is you learn an act. You learn a way to protect yourself, and I have a reasonably good act of being Robin Hutchinson, which I can take out, put on, and cope. And it's an act that protects me and it defends me. But of course it is an act and it isn't me, and I do a lot of talking, and it was very easy for me to think I'll come along here and I'll do my act. And you would have been studiously bored, as I would have been, and I'd have left and people would have said, yeah, that's him then. And I've decided, because of Salah's comments, that I'm just going to see what is in my head and how it comes out. I kind of remember the first time I truly felt that I just didn't fit anywhere, and the loneliness that that brought about. And it happened because I was born in a place called Oldham, which is just outside of Manchester, and up to the age of 6 I went to school there. In my head, school there is much more grown up than it clearly was. I think we just used to run around eating glue, but in my head it was kind of a real place of learning. But the reading, the writing we were being taught was a thing called ITA, which was phonetic spelling. So if you were writing the word frog, you didn't weirdly write F-R-O-G, you wrote F-W-G, fwog. Well, that was great when I was in Oldham. I could write frog with the best of them. And then one day I was put in the back of a car and driven down to Kingston upon Thames and launched into a new school. And in this new school, they'd got this weird habit of spelling frog F-R-O-G. And I missed the bit in Oldham that would come subsequently where they said, do you remember everything we taught you? That was palpably wrong. Here's the things you really need to know. And so I can remember in my head writing my first essay at the age of 6. Well, clearly it was never going to be an essay, but it feels like it was. It was probably what I did in my school holidays. I ate a frog. And every word I wrote came back with a red line through it. And I don't think I've ever felt quite so lost, that everything I thought I knew was wrong. And then when we went into the playground and I spoke, everybody just said, say that again, and laughed because my accent was so different to everybody there. And that afternoon we went back into the class, and I brought along a Dalek, as you did in Oldham, because the afternoon was playing. And so the afternoon started, and I put the Dalek on my desk and was quietly going, exterminate, exterminate, when the teacher just went, what are you doing? Now in my head I hear her say Hutchinson, but she clearly didn't. She'd have used my first name, but it just shows how I've powered this as a memory. She'd have said, Robin, what are you doing? And I remember saying in a very I'm playing. And she just said, we don't play here, we work in the afternoon. And a tiny part of me died. 3 months later, we went back up to Oldham to visit family. And I felt like I was going to be taken back to a place of safety and sanctuary. And I remember meeting up with the best friend I had, and I said something like, oh, it's so good to see you. And she said, don't you speak funny? Because I'd already begun to adopt a southern tone. And I suddenly realised I didn't fit anywhere. That actually, in my heart as a 6-year-old, I felt I'd got no home and that I'd been let down by my parents. And I recount that story because people quite often say, why the heck do you do the things you do? And I wonder at one level whether it's chasing a place to find home, but at another, never wanting anybody to feel so lost that they don't have a place to go to. So the community brain was founded on the belief that everybody is brilliant if they're given the help and support to be brilliant. And the awful thing about the way we live our lives is we seem to work hard at pointing out what people have done wrong or where their frailties lie, and not enough time spending complimenting and supporting. There's a fabulous talk by Sir Ken Robinson on TEDx, How We Educate Creativity Out of Children. If you haven't seen it, 20 minutes of your life worth doing. And we believe we then de-skill adults at work, that we have this awful word called management. And the word is actually to manage something. And we put people in situations where we rob them of their passions and their beliefs and their abilities to do, and we box them and we make them do what it is we want them to do and not. I've had a lucky life. I mean, and I say that with bipolar. I'm lucky because I'm blessed with a beautiful family, amazing friends, and for some strange reason, opportunities come up. So I've had the opportunity to manage large international organisations and some really weird ones as well. But there's a hell of a difference between leadership and management. And leadership is giving that sense of we could go there, and not describing the route or managing people on the route, but rather allowing them to find the way to get to there. But I'll tell you what, more often than not, they'll come back and tell you, you know that place you described? You were wrong. There's a much better place beyond there that I've found. And you've got to be open enough to allow them the chance to make your life better by what they find. And when Salah talked about the way of working, stupid people will just say, let's pretend I'm an architect. That's the house. And the person who's going to live in the house tells you the stairs are entirely the wrong place for the way we live. And you say, I'm really sorry, but I'm right. Those stairs are in the right place. And so you build a house that nobody wants. Years ago, I was lucky enough to start the Rose Theatre in Kingston, and I remember being taken on a tour with an architect who designed theatres, and we went to 3 of his theatres. And we went into one, and there were lighting bars all around without a light on them. And strapped and bolted to the walls were enormous pieces of scaffolding that had been put up. And when I said, what's all the scaffolding there? And he said, other lighting designers won't put the lights on where we put the bars. I said, well, you must have put the bars in the wrong place then. And they went, no, they're in the right place. I said, look, I'm really sorry, we're going to row, because if lighting designers aren't so bloody minded that they'll just say, let's put our lights over there to make it awkward. But we're not listening to the sounds people make. And it's really interesting in the work we're doing at the moment, which focuses around, in part, what happens when regeneration comes to an area. And as many people say, regeneration, there's no such thing, it's just moving people. And the bit that fascinates me is, how do we ensure the voices of people are loud in the song that is written for an area and are not dwarfed and drowned by people with money? So alongside our belief that everybody's brilliant if they're given the support to be brilliant, is another strange thing we've noticed, which we now class as permission to be brilliant. Because if I'm going to be stopped in the street for a good reason, more often than not it will be somebody saying, do you know what I've always wanted to do? And the answer is invariably no. And they go, I've always wanted to do this. And you go, well, you should. And they go, oh, thank you. Now, what have we done to ourselves that we need permission from somebody else to remind us of what it is we really feel passionate about, what we care about? So a lot of the work we do is what we call creating playgrounds for adults. Can we make those spaces that feel safe, where people can come together and know if they fall over, people will be there to pick them up and help them and not to laugh at them? And in a post-COVID world, we are going to need more playgrounds. We're going to need more safe spaces that people can go to and feel, I belong here. My voice is heard here. My thoughts are valued here. I'm also increasingly convinced we're going to need circuses, that actually we are going to need to do things that bring joy. In the old days, and as you can see, I go back over 300 years. When a circus came to town, posters would go up and people would begin to be excited by the fact something was going to happen. And then there would be a procession and parade down the main streets of these magical acts that to a child's eyes were just the visitation of happiness. And then the circus would go on and then it would leave. And when it left, there was a sadness, but there was a memory of something wonderful and magical. And I think we're going to have to kindle new memories for people to hold on to, because we aren't going to turn COVID off. It's going to be around and its impact for generations. But how communities grow together to offer support to each other is going to be fantastic. I love ferns. I just find ferns beautiful. That little bit when it first pokes through the ground again each year, and it has the Fibonacci series, the arc, and it unveils itself into this glorious, I just love. We're lucky to have some in our garden. Today they look stunning because the rain was upon them and the green was just so beautiful. There's a miracle at a tiny way. About 3 days ago, I had a conversation with a bloke called Jiva. Jiva is a good friend. He happens to have a brain the size of a planet, and it often means that when I'm talking to him, I'm doing that nod that you do, which means I'm not really following you, Jiva, but I don't want to expose my ignorance, so I'll say, well, absolutely, tell me that again slowly. And he has been funded to study the Earth from space. What happens when we look at the Earth from outside? But as a result of this, he's got to know and work with this amazing group, and I'll get the name wrong, but it's called something like the Overview Project. And it's been founded in part on the basis of the number of astronauts that gone into space and then looked at the Earth, and it has completely changed their dynamic of belief, because they suddenly realised that politics is petty, that we are one globe, and that somehow we've got to work out the way together to live it better. And there's a belief that if we could get 5% of the population to see the Earth from space, then it would change the zeitgeist in such a way that we would actually make a monumental shift in the way our belief system and our attitudes and our behaviours are. And it doesn't mean we've got to get 5% of the population up into space, despite what some Bransonite people might think. It's actually about having that opportunity to see it. That in some ways is my life, that I hover between utter wonder at the fern and utter disbelief at the Earth, and the bit in the middle scares me to death, because that's where people tend to get involved and manage to really mess things up. So we've been working in Tolworth. Tolworth, lovingly described by the Evening Standard as the scrag end of the Royal Borough of Kingston upon Thames. Now, if you live in a place that's talked about like that, it's very easy to develop a sense that perhaps where you live isn't as valued as other places. And that will impact on the way you see both yourself and your location. Tolworth is going to go through more regeneration than almost any other part of the Borough of Kingston upon Thames. It has one of the worst air pollution problems, not just in the borough, but in southwest London. It has a road called the A3 that scars through it and splits it into two different segments. The A3 is almost impassable for most people, not because it's physically impassable, but there's no reason to cross it, or so it was perceived. Indeed, we used to joke that when Trump was in power, thank you God for one trick, that if he was serious about the Mexicans, he'd have run the A3 down there rather than build a wall, because nobody would have crossed it. When we started the project, we managed to get 300 plus local residents up at the top of Tolworth Tower, 21 stories up, along with university students, college students, local kids, etc. It was amazing to hear them say, I hadn't realised it was so green over there. I didn't know what was there. And when you say, where do you live? They point to the ground below and go, I'm there. And of course, what had happened in part was, one, nobody had ever invited them. Nobody had told them the story of what was there to make them feel it was worth crossing. And actually, if you live in a place where people say it's pretty, then why would you think about venturing out and looking around? So we've been doing a lot of stuff about animating the area with people's stories and making people feel proud. And one of those things was putting some murals up at Tolworth Roundabout. And they show the wildlife that is there within Tolworth Court Farm Fields that Salah mentioned earlier. And when we put the first one up, which was of a kestrel and a heron, Facebook, that great barometer of people's power, said, it was just filled with people saying, this won't last, this will be graffitied, this will be telled, this will be this will be that. And occasionally a little weak voice going, give it a chance. I'm doing that, by the way. Facebook doesn't do voices. And then about 2 to 3 weeks later, suddenly there were people saying, my children want to walk through the underpass now. They want to go down. They want to see it. By the time we put the second one up, the comments were, isn't it beautiful? Isn't it great? And then occasional, that won't last in Tolworth. And then it became Tolworth residents saying, don't talk about where we live like that. We like where we live. That shift is amazing. If you do not care about where you live, you will not invest your energy in it. If you don't care about where you live, you aren't going to look after it in its greenness, in its opportunity. By making that shift, you turn a space into a place. And a lot of what we do is about that transformation. By putting on silly events like Surbiton Ski Sunday and the Freshwater Sardine Festival, you can make people smile. And if you make people smile, you have a chance to change their heart. Nobody's ever changed their minds with their arms folded. You have got to get people to a place of happiness to give them that chance to feel differently. And we are surrounded by amazing and brilliant people who come forward from a community to say, do you know what I've always wanted to do? Or to tell you something you'd never dream possible in a place. Every place has stories. But you've got to create the atmosphere in which people feel confident to tell them. I always used to say with companies, we need to create a company where the greatest idea will come from the cleaner. And the reason it will come from the cleaner is because they feel confident that they work in a company where their voice is as valuable as the directors. And we need to do that with communities as well, that people know that their voice is important. And actually, if they're angry about something or they're cynical, we have to hear that voice, and we have to help them go on a journey which actually turns that natural negativity into something where they begin to realise, do you know, I feel better when I'm trying. We have adopted Tolworth Station. It was a formal thing, you know, we had to go to a board, and now Tolworth Station's about 6 years old and can run around on its own. It's great. Now, we've adopted Tolworth Station, and we adopted it because we could. There wasn't much more of an idea than that. But something weird's happened in COVID, of course, because what COVID has done has made people far more appreciative of the area that they live and their relationship to it, to green spaces, to heritage, to public spaces, to local shops, to the value of community, to being supported. But stations are going to have to change too, because if TfL's best predictions are correct and that in 10 years' time passenger numbers will still be down 20%, what are we going to do with a system that was designed for arrivals and departures? What are we going to do with these amazing footprints littered around the country if you are not going there to leave? What could happen if we start reimagining them as places of community activity, start-up business activity, SME activity, places of learning and creation? There are 363 stations in London alone. Take out the middle core because we know what they're like, but out in the suburbs, there's real opportunities to play now. And if communities come to play, we can do something tremendous. Now, of course, what is weird is we've been lucky in Tolworth. We've managed to bring together Network Rail Transport for London, South Western Railways, Guinness, Lidl, you name it, University Council, all sitting together to go, what happens if we all played together and tried to play a game where we all win? And actually the ambition is that every member of the community has a chance here, has an opportunity, feels at home here. Stations are very democratic spaces. The millionaire and the cleaner stand on the same platform. What if we can do that? When you invite big dinosaurs into a room, you really have to be careful of their feet because they can accidentally tread on you. And it was amazing how quickly the conversation turned to demolition and flats. And it's really great that by accident we've got a voice in there, because the answer for every solution is not going to be more flats. We need more spaces, chameleon spaces as we call them, that can change their colour to reflect need at any point. And stations could provide that if we get away from the old model. And that old model is, as Salah so eloquently put it, lost. It's not behind a desk drawing for somebody else their life. It's living that life and drawing what it is everybody wants to get out of it. And I'll finish on this last point, because this has been rubbish. But trees and plants, when they grow well, have root systems. We all understand root systems, or we think we do. But growing off those roots is a fungus called mycorrhizal fungi. That fungi extends the networks of the roots so that they can get more nutrients, more water. Basically, the health of the tree, the plant, resides in that mutual partnership. When you fertilise a plant, you kill that fungi. Dinosaurs, or big organisations, are very good at spotting trees and saying, what a beautiful tree. We should have that tree over here in this community. And they spend a fortune building a tree. And then they get really odd about the fact that it doesn't work very well. And it doesn't work well because it's not embedded in any natural root system. And we've got to understand that actually, for really healthy areas, the job is to turn the soil and to let the sunlight and the rain fall on people who want to grow and want to make that difference. And that's really fundamentally what we do. And now we get asked questions, oh, is it scalable? And the answer is no, because it mustn't be and it shouldn't be. It could be, in principles, replicable, but it must always be different wherever it is. Otherwise, we're going for vanilla as our finest ambition. And actually what we do, I think, is put down these tiny little patchwork squares of vibrant colour. And then it's up to others to be the thread to draw them together into the pattern that they want. And we're going to need more of those squares and more thread to give people the confidence to go, actually, you are not going to force me to go into the office every day anymore. You are not going to force me to accept what used to be good enough, because we've seen what could be possible if we're allowed to play. So I'd say to anybody here and anybody who's listening, either come and play with us. We always say we want everybody to come and play, but if you come to steal the ball, you're not going to be welcome. Or invite us to come and play where you are, and we will come not with a game, but rather the ways in which you can play that will draw out the people in your area that will make that game possible. It was really delightful to hear Salah speak, because I've had the great fortune of, ages ago when people say you seem to be able to do a lot of stuff, and my answer was I am surrounded by brilliant people, and that is true. But the danger is when you talk about being surrounded by brilliant people, a lot of people will instinctively go, well, it can't work for me then because I don't know that many brilliant people. I now have another saying, which is surround yourself with as many incompetent people as you can, because you will find competency. Because actually, in a healthy group, we all cover for each other's weaknesses. And you can draw together in volume every skill and talent that you need, but they might be rubbish at other bits. And therefore you've got to be the strength for them there. I hate Excel spreadsheets. I can do them, but it takes me an entire day to do something that somebody could do in 5 minutes. I give myself a perverse sense of pleasure that I've lost a day of my life doing something somebody else could do easier, because I've been brought up in a system that says somehow that's good use of time. Actually, it ain't good use of time. Get people who are good at it to do it, so you've got time to be the best you can be, but do it with a generous heart and soul that says, while I am doing this, what can I be doing for you? I'll shut up now.
you so much. It was really good to hear more about what you do and about the community networks that you've built up around here or helped to get going. Can you say a bit about some of the other sort of subgroups and organisations that are developed out of the community brain?
Yeah, I mean, we tend to, the reason for the link with the mycorrhizal fungi is we did what we called a spider graph at the time because it sounded amusing as a name, which was looking at the community brain, then looking at all the projects around it, then looking at all the groups and individuals who'd base themselves around a project because it was instinctively theirs. But then we began to see all of these lines joining these different groups together as individuals or organisations suddenly went, oh, that's worth knowing about, or maybe we could go and help there. The bit that's truly exciting is the bits we can't even plot because they've just got, people have come and said, I've learnt or I've found, and I'm now going to go off and do my thing. We refer to every project we do as the baton because it should never rest in our hands long enough for us to believe it's ours. It should always be given to somebody. Now, we can base that on a philosophical thought, or we could say we're fundamentally lazy. And that's my attitude, actually, weirdly enough. If somebody's prepared to take a thought and make it wonderful, why the hell would I want to go running alongside it, being a nuisance in relation to that? So we take magical joy with one-to-one, and we take real joy of Rocky Street at the moment, and all these other groups that are, or organisations that are finding themselves through activity, because that's really where the success is. It's not having done an Excel spreadsheet.
I have a question. So Salah, I asked Salah how One-to-One Collective came about, and obviously you mentioned a little bit about the need with Community Brain, but how would you say for you Community Brain was born and how did it come about?
I suppose Community Brain is just another manifestation of a lot of the things that I've been able to do in life. So I didn't know I was bipolar till the year 2000. It was a great way to celebrate a new millennium. And I now look back on my life before that and think, oh, that doesn't half make a lot of sense, my behaviour at that point. So I had a great ability to turn the tables over every 3 years, to do things and then just vault the tables and go and do something completely different. But I've always had this sense that the world shouldn't be like this, that there should be opportunity. And so because I was based down here, I started theatre companies and art galleries and stuff when I was about 17, 18 and then obviously the journey on with the Rose and the Douglas Centre, now Corner House and other bits of pieces. But it was the absolute realisation that success has many parents, failure is an orphan. None of these things could happen if it was me. One thing's for certain, if it was me, they weren't going to happen. You actually need people who go, I get this, I believe this, and you've got... So I've had these weird chance to go, here's some fun, and I've needed it. I've needed places to go to where I don't feel I have to be me, and I need to go places because my head is permanent. Anne said, I had a phone call once, and the phone call, I've had more than one, but let's use this one. I had a phone call once, it's in my diary, and watch my face. And basically, it was the people ringing to say we'd got the grant to do ShedX. So a large sum of money to do something I ultimately believed in absolutely. And Anne said it was like watching a bottle of champagne be opened and go flat in a second. Because it went, we've done it. Oh, God, we've got to do it. And so I'm always predicting failure. And I need places to go to where I can be surrounded by people who remind me it's worth doing. And Community Brain came out of a very strange and simple thing. I'd started saying to people in Surbiton, or Seething as we'd refer to it, what do you like about living here? And almost invariably they say, oh, it's great, Robin. 16 minutes to London, 16 minutes to the countryside. And it struck us one day, if you describe where you live by the speed you can leave it, what the hell's going on? And could we do things where people might say, come to us this weekend, we're only 16 minutes from you, We're only 16 minutes from you, come up here. And so we started doing, and I have to say, looking back, you know, I introduced the International Year of the Dado Rail. I've been a nutter for as long as I can remember doing stupid things, which to me now are quite normal. So when we started A Legend of a Mythical Goat Boy that defeats a giant to give the land back to the villages, to me that was as straightforward as saying, you know, well, of course we'd do that to reverse a 16-minute philosophy. When we had our first procession, which was due to kick off at 3 o'clock, at 10 to 3, I think there were 9 of us. And it was like, it's not really a procession with 9 people. It's just like a sad bus queue quietly moving about. And then at 3 o'clock, we had about 350 people who'd risk coming out to be silly, to believe that maybe things could be slightly different. And that, I think, is the founding principle of the community brain, is that sense of, do we just accept this is it, best we've got? You know, I mean, we live at Kingston, it's a dormitory town. And if we're not careful, as we've described with COVID's, you know, a city has been a jammy donut. All the jams in the middle, people commute in, come back in a diabetic coma, ghost walk their lives. Could COVID spread the jam? Is this our chance to look at suburbs and other areas and say, do you know what? We should feel good where we live. We should have opportunity where we live. So we're saying a future built on 4 pillars: more local, more mutual, more equitable and more sustainable. About the right of the individual to feel a relationship where they live, but that relationship brings a duty of care. And that's what the community brain, he said, backfilling is.